had only been a week since Damian, along with Saito and Tai, had found themselves being summoned to another world. The three boys, respective heroes of their own worlds, each one being pulled from a different multiverse of sorts, all being summoned by three girls in particular from a world that was more in the fantasy age of magic than anything else. Damian Wayne, aka Robin, was now trying to figure out the best way to get everyone back home to their respective worlds, since they all didn't come from the same one. While the other boys were looking through to find any information that they could. Before they left, Damian would give each one of them an earpiece. It was a communicator of sorts. Hopefully, they wouldn't be too far away from one another. Well, Damian and Tai wouldn't have to worry about that, as their respective familiars to Louise and to Siesta, they would be in the same area. It would be Saito who would be far off, since he would be with the princess in her castle. But thankfully, Saito would integrate the earpiece into his blue beetle armor, so that way he could keep it charged and he could up the signal, even if he was far out. He wasn't too far away, but the signal, he would have to boost it with his own power, just so that he could keep in contact with the others. In the meantime, for Tai and for Damian, they had to play along to get along. Sure, Damian didn't like listening to Louise all that much, but still, he had to be cordial. As his father would have told him, he had to see the bigger picture. Sometimes the true mark of a man isn't always doing what you want to do, but doing what you need to do. And right now, Damian had to blend in, as it were. Sure, he already had confidence in his own power and skill, but that wasn't the main issue. If he wanted to, if he really wanted to go back to his old ways, slaughtering most of the people on campus, taking what he needed and finding a way out, that was one route to go. But he was in another world, with a language he could hardly read. He was making progress, of course. The boy had learned many languages. This would be no different. But still, it would take time. And for the people that were trying to help him out, he would be wise to be respectful, even if he didn't always want to be. As such, he followed doing the duties of a familiar, even if it meant doing things like washing and cleaning Louise's clothes. He had lived for the last 4 years at a Tibetan monk's temple, where humility was the name of the game, so he just viewed this as an extension of that. However, just because he listened to Louise, it didn't mean he suffered her nonsense. No, he wasn't going to take getting whipped, beaten, and pushed around. The girl was going to learn to be respectful, to ask, to use her words. Louise begrudgingly had to accept these terms or save face. This was her best option. In a way, the two created more of a silent agreement more than anything else. Louise would hold her tongue, not speaking down to Damian, and Damian in turn would listen to her request whenever reasonably possible. Thankfully, as a familiar, he didn't have to worry with any things that were too overly drawn out. For the most part, they were just random chores that he had to do. Granted, he wished that the girl could have just done it herself, but coming from an affluential family, he kind of understood what came with the territory. In the meantime, Siesta was getting along with her familiar well, the Green Lantern known as Tai Pham. He was a kind and cordial boy who used his power primarily to help her with her chores, making things honestly a lot easier. Because of that, Siesta was able to make her classes more, she finished her assignments a lot more quickly, and all in all, becoming a student was a lot more better for her. Of course, you still had those that looked down on her for being a plebeian, and even though she was a work-study student, the key word being work came first before being a student. In their eyes, she was more or less a token student, if you will. Something that they could parade around to the plebeians, saying that this could be you if you work hard enough. But really, she was just the exception to the rule. Tai came to learn this about Siesta, especially one night as they were finishing up some laundry together. Tai, using his Green Lantern ring, was able to wring out the clothes perfectly and was able to hang them up to dry. You're amazing. The way that you're able to do that with that magic ring of yours. Well, I wouldn't... maybe it is magic. I can never really come and make heads or tails of it anyway. How did you get it? I actually got it from my aunt. She was a Green Lantern before me, but when she passed away, I was chosen to replace her. And so, I've been the Green Lantern ever since. There's more of you? I mean, in your world, There are lots of us. Not just from Earth, but from all over. Siesta would be amazed with the tales of other worlds, places high in the sky beyond the stars. It sounded like nothing more but a fairy tale, but still she hung on every word. Hearing about some of his adventures, some of the times he's traveled out in space, the Emerald City of Oa, the Green Lantern Corps. They sounded like knights, sworn protectors, but not just of their own world, but of all worlds. In her eyes, he was truly a hero, one worth admiring in every way. And for Tai, he came to learn more about Siesta also. Well, the only reason I was able to even go to school was because of my father. He worked so hard all his life. He died when I was young though, but everything he had saved up, it was just enough to afford the tuition for this academy. Granted, I knew I'd have to go in through work studies because I don't come from noble blood, but still, it was a way for me to get a better life. I figure while I'm here, I can learn and grow, and hopefully I can make something of myself. But you already have. You're one of the kindest and sweetest people that I've met here. You're always giving it your all no matter what. Honestly, with qualities like that, it's more than enough to acknowledge someone like you. You don't need anything else to be special. I think that sometimes, but it's not so easy. At least when it comes to me, to this world at least, it doesn't really matter how smart or how talented or how pretty you are. All that matters is what's your last name. That seems to be the only thing of any importance. And don't get me wrong, I'm not ashamed of where I come from. I'm happy of my family. I only hope that I can use the opportunity given to me to live a life they would be proud of. For Tai, this was something he could relate to. After all, his grandparents were immigrants from Vietnam who had come to America, arrived in Coast City, who didn't have much, and through their humble means, worked to give their children and their children's children a better life. And he felt as though he were the living embodiment of that. If anyone understood how she felt, it was him. Damian, in the meantime, would spend his nights studying. The boy only slept when he needed to. Thankfully, with Professor Colbert, he was able to pick up on the language of this world just a little bit. He could make sense of a few sentences here and there, and he spent his time in the library. For now, he had to try to figure out how to get them all home. The issue wasn't only for him, but it was for them also. Each boy came from a different world entirely, a whole different multiverse. He remembered reading about some multiverse adventures that his father had gone on when he was studying in the Batcave. Of course, the adventures were far and few between, and Damian wondered what his father was doing on his end. They hadn't spoken in a long time. In fact, the only reason why they hadn't met up yet was because Damian was short of coming back to Gotham. He still remembered when he left, his father giving him the instructions to travel to the monk's monastery, a place where he could learn true inner peace. After fighting against Talon, he had to come to terms with just who and what he truly was. Was he the son of Batman, the grandson of Ra's al Ghul, the son of Talia al Ghul? He was all these things and yet so much more. The grandson of the head of the demon, the son of the Dark Knight. For many, he was touted as being the one who would lead mankind into salvation. However, he didn't agree with that ideology. But at the same time, did he agree with that of his father? Who was Damian really? These were the questions he had spent years trying to ask, the things he spent trying to figure out. And just when he thought he had everything together, he suddenly found himself dragged to another world that he knew nothing about. And even more so, he wondered just how long it would take for him to get home. In all likelihood, if his father hadn't noticed by now, he'd probably be working on trying to track where Damian had gone. Although he had left without a single trace of him being left behind. How long would it take for his father to realize his son was in another dimension? Who knew? And even more so, how long would it take for him to get to him even if he could travel through other dimensions? After all, the multiverse is a large, and I mean a large, area. It's not like you can just jump through a few different portals and bingo, you found who you're looking for. Who knows how many worlds he'd have to sift through, how long it could take. Again, it could be a few days, a few hours, a few months, maybe even a few years, maybe even never. All of this was a real possibility. Damian knew that he couldn't just sit by and wait on that chance. No, while he was here, he was going to figure things out. He was going to have to do something. And then there was Saito, who had spent his time in the castle of Princess Henrietta. Safe to say, Saito was briefed on everything he needed to know about the castle. After all, the reason why he was chosen to be the familiar for the princess was following a dangerous coup attempt that had been launched on the castle. Strange enemy forces had tried to break in. Thankfully, they were captured and stopped in time, but even still, it was thought that the princess would need protection at all times, and that was the role Saito served. While he was here, of course, he had access to the royal library and the royal tutors. So, along with Henrietta, he took his time studying as well. Although, it was hard to focus, especially when Henrietta was next to him all the time. I mean, the girl was truly a thing of beauty. It was hard for anyone to keep focus in a situation like this, and he was being fed rather handsomely. Yes, he was a familiar, but still, he was the familiar of the princess and future ruler of the country. He was only going to be treated with the best of the best. And as such, Saito could safely say that he was living as good of a life as he ever had. And you could say he was probably the most spoiled of the three boys. But all the same, he was making progress on his end. And for now, the boys would continue to be at work, trying their best to figure out a way to get to their respective homes. However, in the meantime, there were other forces at work. Primarily, a high-ranking duke, the one known as Count Mott. He was a noble, and his family held high sway in society. He had set his sights on a girl in the academy in particular, one that he wanted in his own services. Of course, Headmaster Osmond didn't like this arrangement at all. But still, when dealing with aristocrats, with their money and power and influence, it's not something you can take lightly. For better or for worse, his hands were tied in the situation. In the meantime, there was someone else that had their eyes on one of the new familiars that had arrived to town, that being in the form of Crochet. She had taken notice of Damian. The young man was definitely handsome and attractive, especially with the way that he was able to carry himself. So dignified. He was truly a warrior all to himself, and yet there was so much mystery and intrigue with him as well. So much so that she felt the need to get the boy into her grasp, and before Damian knew it, he found himself being enticed into her room. Of course, Damian was completely aware of what type of woman this was. He'd seen them all throughout his life. Well, primarily, when it came to his father. Didn't matter if it was Catwoman, his own mother, sometimes Poison Ivy, maybe even Harley Quinn. It was just something about him and his father that just attracted women. Was it the power, the money, maybe all three, sometimes the ruggedness? All he knew was that the female was definitely a complex creature, and yet all the same, they were easy to understand, easy to read. Damian didn't particularly like doing this, but he knew when to turn on the charm. He knew when to say just enough and when to hold back. He was the type of person who studied what you might call the game to a T. Crochet could be a form of information. She could be used to his advantage. No different than any other situation. He decided to play along with the femme fatale, to be as much of the son of the playboy billionaire as he ever was. And safe to say, he had the woman within the palm of his hands. Of course, Louise didn't take too kindly to this, and in the midst of her ensuing tantrum, Damian had to block her attack, which turned into an explosion that ended up breaking his sword in two. As they went back to her room, Louise was entirely upset. I can't have my familiar just going off with that busty harpy of all people. It would be an insult to my family name. You should know better. I mean, seriously, what would you see in a woman like that anyway? Nothing in particular. All I was doing was trying to gain information, that's all. Yeah, right. You men are all the same. You see a big pair of breasts and you can't help yourself. Oh, please. Not all men are like that. I'll have you know, there's more to a woman than just her chest size. Oh, I take a lot more into consideration. And don't flatter yourself. It's not like it's a bad thing anyway. Why you? Before she had a chance to hit him once again, he grabbed hold of her hand. I'm sorry, but the weak and the feeble don't get to complain and make demands. Weak? That's right. That's what you are. All you do is make a fuss, a tantrum. You throw your weight around whenever you can't get your way. And yet, what have you done to even warrant such an attitude? The last time I checked, you're the one that's called the Zero for a reason. Don't call me that. If the shoe fits, shut up. Can't handle the truth? Shut up. You know I'm right. You go around here acting all high and mighty, yet you have no reason to be. It's time you wake up to reality and face the facts. The truth is, the only reason why you're like this is to make up for your own insecurities. Because in the end of the day, you know you're not good enough. The only reason why anyone will hold you in any high regard is because I'm around. And it's not because you're a good master. It's not even because you've summoned the best familiar. It's because you got lucky. That's all that matters. You got lucky and summoned someone who was already capable and could take care of themselves. You don't even have to lift a finger. Well, I'll have you know, my skills are not to be used as your plaything. I said I'd work with you and play ball, but not if you're gonna act like this. Don't think that for 1 second I truly need you, 'cause I don't. If it came down to it, I could make my way in this world just fine. But you, could you even say the same? Louise started to become fearful. Tell me, if all of this faded away, if you didn't have your money or your title, what would you even be? Who the hell are you, Louise? Can you answer that? You can't, because you don't even know. You don't know who you are, who you really are. Instead, you keep trying to live up to this ideal image, an image of you that simply doesn't exist. I'm sorry, Louise, but here's the God-honest truth. You're not good at magic. You're awful. You're terrible. You're one of the worst. And the sad part is that rather than even try to improve, try to get better, you look to blame everyone else for your failures. If that's really how you want to keep living life, then be my guest. You're more than welcome to. But you're not going to get very far. You'll always be the dead last. You will always be a zero. Shut up! Louise would simply run out of the room, storming in anger and protest. She wasn't sure of where she was going to go or what she was going to do. She ended up running past Ty in the hallway as he made his way to Damian. What did you do now? I simply told her the truth. Yeah, and yet why is she leaving in tears? What? It's the facts. You've seen her. She's not good at anything, yet she talks and brags with the best of them. It's better that she learns this now than keep going with that same mindset. I should know. I used to be just like her. I used to feel like I was the best around, that no one could tell me anything. If she keeps going through life like that, it's only going to end up being worse for someone like her. Because in the end of the day, she's never going to learn. She's never going to see reason. That type of attitude is going to get her killed, or worse. That might be, but still, you don't have to always be so harsh with people, Damian. Even if what you're saying is right, you still have to take her feelings into consideration. After speaking with Ty, Damian, feeling bad, would try to go and find Louise. He had managed to catch up with her. She was at the academy garden. Under the light of the 2 moons that shined above, she looked in the water, looking at her own reflection, the ripples etching across her face. For Louise, she always knew that she was a screw-up. It didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that. But she always tried to go through life with her head held high, believing that if she always held on to her nobility, if she always held to that strong sense of pride in oneself, that she could overcome any adversity she was faced against. But ever since Damian arrived, he was like the mirror that reminded her of just how ugly she was. If anything, he was the reflection of what she truly felt on the inside. The things she always said internally but never said aloud, those were the things he had no problem saying to her face. And now those were the things she had to live with. If you've come here to yell at me some more, you're wasting your breath. Damian took a breath before walking next to her. There was once a boy who had it all. He came from a great lineage. His parents were some of the most exceptional people on earth. His grandfather led an army of mighty warriors. He was raised to be the savior of mankind. However, that wasn't what he wanted for himself. And even more so, no matter how hard he tried, he could never live up to the expectations of anyone. In the end, he failed his grandfather, his mother, and his father. For a boy that was raised with everything, every tool, he could never be what they wanted him to be. It sounds like a sad story. It's my story. What type of... There's no point in going into details. It wouldn't matter. Look, you can be better. You have the potential to be better. But it doesn't start here. It starts here. He pointed to her heart. You're not really doing it for the right reasons, are you? All of this, your schooling, your training, everything. Why do you do it? Because it's my family. Besides that, is any of this really what you want? To be an aristocrat, it's exactly what I want. It's the highest form of honor one can receive. If I don't have my honor, I have nothing. Ever since you've come here, you challenge that every day. I can't do anything right. All I wanted was to summon my familiar. I didn't mean to summon you. And yet even still, now that you're here, you don't act like a familiar. You don't do anything like a familiar. Because I'm not a familiar. I know that. But what's done is done. I can't change it. I tried my best and you're what appeared. And the sad part is, you don't even use magic. And yet you're better than me in every way. So what does that say about me? It says that you're pretty powerful if you summon someone like me. I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I'd like to think that I'm better than any dragon or creature you could have conjured up. I guess so. If you want to get better, I'll help you. What? If you want to get better, I will help you. I mean, it's not going to be easy, and you're really going to have to put in the work. But maybe you're not as bad as what everyone says you are. I mean, after all, from what I've been able to learn, this summoning ritual or whatever it was you guys did, you're supposed to summon a familiar that's best suited for you. Well, you, your friend, and that maid girl managed to summon me, a Green Lantern, and a Scarab user. You probably wouldn't even understand it, but you guys have actually summoned some of the more powerful people that you could ever hope to imagine. So, in that regard, I'd say you're probably one of the best that I've ever met. For Louise, she was surprised by that statement. If what he was saying was true, then just exactly what had she, Henrietta, and Siesta managed to do? Who truly were these boys? The fact that they could act in such a way, like they were always in control of the situation. What kind of lives did they live? All the same, that did leave a point though. Where was Siesta? You haven't heard? Immediately, a green streak could be seen in the night sky, flying off in a direction that they had no idea of. When they ran back inside to see what had happened, they found Goucher and Montmorency sitting together. What happened? Louise would ask. That boy, Siesta's familiar. He found out that Count Mont took her away and he flew off. He didn't look entirely happy. Oh no. Where's the Count's house? You mean his mansion? Goucher would give them the directions, and Louise would get on horseback along with Damian as they would head to the Count's home. When Kershay and Tabitha heard what happened, Tabitha offered for them to fly on her dragon. It'd be much faster and they needed to get there as soon as possible. By the time they arrived, it looked like the mansion had been ran through. And when they got inside, they found Ty, the Green Lantern himself, emanating in his glow as he stood before the Count. Siesta was holding onto his arm, begging for him to stop. I promise, Ty, I'm okay. It's... No. Listen here. You're not going to take her away. Not anywhere she doesn't want to go. So, you have the nerve to enter into my home and to threaten me in such a manner? I'll have you executed, boy. Why don't you go on ahead and try it? I'll take on you or anyone else who dares to mess with her. She just wants to live her life. And you think you can just buy someone? How could you even do something like that? When you have money, you can do whatever you want. That's the way this world works. It's how it's always been and how it will always be. You look at her and you see a human. To me, all I see is a piece of property. A piece of property that you're trying to steal from me. It won't be your property when you're dead. Get a hold of yourself! Damian would yell out as Ty turned to face him. This is none of your business. You're getting riled up. You're supposed to be able to control your emotions, aren't you? That's why you're a Green Lantern. It's funny coming from you. You held a blade to someone's throat like it was nothing. So why is this any of your concern? It's not. All I'm asking is that you think things through. You've never taken a life. I know you haven't. This isn't you. You're letting yourself get riled up for no reason. It took a moment, but Ty realized he was right. He had let anger consume him. He had lost himself in that moment. As he let himself relax, turning his back and laying his guard down, the Count would take a sword, aiming to strike him in the back. However, before he could do so, Damian would move into the way in time, managing to push Ty from the incoming slash, although taking it to his left arm. Although Damian could fight through the pain as he kicked the sword out of the Count's hand before holding it to his throat. Thankfully, though, Kershay would step in to resolve the matter. If it was about payment, then she had a ton of relics from her family's treasury that she could offer, in exchange that Siesta be given her freedom and that this incident be forgotten. Seeing as how Kershay came from a rather wealthy and prestigious family, the Count was willing to overlook the offense. Ty even offered to fix the mansion using his power ring, and thankfully enough, he was able to reconstruct everything he had broken. So for now, the Count would accept this payment in exchange for them leaving and staying out of his sight. While Ty would apologize profusely to Siesta and to everyone else for allowing his anger to get the best of him and for losing control, Siesta couldn't help but be fond. The fact that someone would get so angry to fight on her behalf. Was this what it meant to have a familiar? To have a friend? To have someone that would go that far for you? Of course, to Ty, he felt like he hadn't done much. But to Siesta, that boy had just gone up against a powerful aristocrat, broken into his mansion, and demanded her freedom. And if it hadn't been for the others intervening on his behalf, he probably would have followed through on his promise, and who knows how much more. Of course, he had to control himself, that much was certain, but even still, something else had come from this experience. a truly deepening feeling, one that was growing within her heart. Thankfully, everyone would return back to the academy safe and sound. While Damian was having his arm looked at and patched up by Louise of all people. Of course, Damian was surprised to see the girl putting in so much effort. She didn't even mind her hands being stained with blood. Of course, she slapped on the gauze a little tight, and there was a little bit of a stinging sensation, but still, baby steps. All baby steps. When Damian awoke the next day, he found something on the table. It was a dingy sword, but all the same, it was marked property of Robin, familiar of Louise del Velladare. It's not like my katana, but seems sturdy enough. It'll do. I hope it does, partner. It seems you and I will be acclimately acquainted. What the? You talk? Of course I talk. And what year is this? Where am I? How the hell did I even get here? What the? You don't know? No. First thing I know, I'm stuck in a wooden box for I don't know how long. Then I'm wrapped up in cloth. And then I'm laid on this table and now you're holding me. Although I've got to say, it feels like we were always meant to be partners. What's your name, kid? My name's Damian. Although, I guess you could say my alias is Robin. Damian the Robin, huh? My name's Deathlinger. Deathlinger? Yep, that's my name. Don't wear it out. Okay. So you're a talking sword. Mm-hmm. Can you do anything? Anything a sword can do. I see. Damian would step outside with his newfound sword. Finding a sturdy piece of rock, he lifted it into the air before taking his sword and slicing it in half. You're pretty sturdy, aren't you? You could say that. I'm better than any standard sword. I'm something made entirely different. Something that all those other swords couldn't possibly hope to measure up to. Good to know. You could be very useful. I might even take you back to my world with me. Another world, huh? More things to cut down. I'm all for it. You're awake. Damian would turn to see Louise standing there. I'm surprised you're up so early. I just wanted to get to the market in time, that's all. I thought maybe I could come out here and practice in peace. Damian saw all the craters formed around her. Seems you've really been putting in the work, huh? I had to start sometime. I couldn't just wait forever. Why don't you go get some rest, okay? It's still early. You got a couple hours before class starts. But, come on. If you're going to really put in the work, you can't do it tired or on an empty stomach. I'll let you know when breakfast is ready. Later on, they would gather in the mess hall for breakfast. All of the students with their familiars, respectively. That was until a poster was being placed on all of the bulletin boards. For you see, there was an upcoming event. It was known as the Familiar Exhibition. It was when those who had recently summoned familiars would all gather together to display their talents and abilities. However, this year, there was going to be something special. And both Ty and Damian would read it in bold. They couldn't understand the language fully, but for what this poster said, it didn't need much explanation. Come one, come all, to the day of the Familiar Exhibition, where the students of Tristan Academy will unveil their brand new familiars, showing off their impressive skills and feats. And in something never before seen, in the main event, there's going to be a three-way battle between the three top familiars of this year's candidates. First up, the familiar of Princess Henrietta, Saito Higare, the Blue Beetle, the familiar of Siesta, the Plebeian, Tai Pham, the Green Lantern, and finally, versus the familiar of Luis del Villadare, Damian Wayne, the Robin. Both Damian and Tai would hear their communications going off in their earpiece, as Saito was getting the news as well. What in the Pokemon battles is going on here? We have to fight each other? Damian simply rolled his eyes. It seemed like it. But this was going to be fun. And as to who would be the victor, well, that's something you'll just have to wait and see. This concludes Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What If Robin Was Luis's Familiar, Season 1, Part 2. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue with Part 3 of What If Robin Was Luis's Familiar. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.